Washington recently passed a controversial 9.9% tax on income over $1 million, a major shift for a state that has long avoided income taxes. And as we've been reporting, it is already facing multiple legal challenges, including one lawsuit from former Attorney General Rob McKenna and former state Supreme Court Justice Phil Talmadge. And now comments from the bill's lead sponsor are drawing attention to what lawmakers expected when they passed this. And this is our first chance to speak with Senate Majority Leader Jamie Pedersen. He joins us now on the Gee and Ursula Show. Good morning, Senator.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So let's just start generally. You were the primary sponsor of this bill in the Senate. What problem is this tax designed to solve, and why now?
Yeah, so there are two big problems that we're trying to solve. First of all, we're trying to make sure that we have adequate revenue to fund public schools, to fund higher education, early learning, healthcare, all the things that are really at risk as a result of the dramatic budget cuts that are coming at us from the federal government. The second problem is that Washington has a catastrophically upside down tax system that asks poor people to pay a dramatically higher share of their income than it asks rich people to pay. So we're trying to make our tax system more fair and make sure that people who have the ability to do so can contribute to making those investments in the public that we'd like to see.
I just want you to know that everything that you just said, I talk about that all the time. And I agree. That is, the regressive tax code and system here in this state is outrageous. I believe that wealthy should pay more, especially than the poor people. My question would be, what would you say to the people that do believe in what you just said, however, they don't trust the way that this is getting out there and the way things are going about?
Yeah, I'd say I hear that. And I hear that from my constituents, even right here in the heart of Seattle, people who don't have a big well of trust. One of the ways that we tried to build that trust is we said from the beginning, we're going to use a substantial part of the revenue from this tax to lower more regressive taxes on folks in the state. So the tax will raise about $3.5 billion a year. About $1.2 billion of that will go back into lowering sales taxes, lowering business taxes, providing free lunches for kids in public schools, increasing the working families tax credit, basically trying to make the whole system more fair for poor and working class people.
Okay, I want to go back to last year. The legislature reaffirmed Washington's longstanding position against an income tax, but you later referred to that as a pie crust promise, easily made and easily broken. And you talk about trust. Why should voters believe that this is going to stay limited to millionaires and not expand over time?
Yeah, so, first, let me be clear about that statement. That was kind of an offhand statement in a conversation that lasted about an hour with KIRO before the session started. In the 2024 legislature, we passed a bill that essentially said what was true. We don't have an income tax in Washington state. This bill this year, the millionaires tax, makes a pretty narrow exception to that policy and says that we will tax income only over $1 million. The legislature has had, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about what this 1933 Supreme Court ruling said. It didn't say that income taxes are illegal in Washington state. It said that income taxes are property taxes, and so they can't be more than 1%, and they have to be flat. So for 93 years, the legislature has had the ability to do an income tax on everyone in the state. And guess what? No one has ever even proposed that, because we know it would be wildly unpopular, and we know it would be unfair to the poor and working class people that we're trying to help. So there is no desire from the governor. There is no desire from the current legislature to expand the millionaires tax down to everyone. And of course, even if we did that, it would also be subject to the power of initiative by the people. And I feel pretty confident, based on polling that we've seen, that a broad-based income tax would not have the support of the public. On the other hand, a targeted income tax that really asks people at the upper end, we're talking about 20,000 households in our state, to pay more to help support the programs that 8 million people in our state rely on. That seems to be relatively popular.
Senator, this particular tax, the way it was passed in the legislature, is also getting criticism from Democrats, including former state Supreme Court Justice Phil Talmadge, who is one of the attorneys filing suit to block this tax. He was on our show recently, and I wanted to play something for you and have you respond.
For the proponents of the legislation to talk about this as a millionaires tax now rings rather hollow. I mean, it becomes very clear that this isn't a tax directed at millionaires. It's a tax directed at everybody in the state of Washington. This isn't really overall tax reform. What we're talking about is simply more revenue in this particular bill. We're not talking about any particular tax changes that would make the tax system overall fairer. We're not talking about major changes in the sales tax, major changes in the property tax. Rather, we're just talking about more revenue.
Yeah, so with all respect to former Justice Talmadge, I have to disagree with pretty much every part of what he just said. First of all, this is the largest tax cut on small businesses in state history. We are more than doubling the small business credit. As a result, if you have a small business that has gross receipts of less than $300,000, you won't pay a cent of B&O tax as a result of this bill. It includes broad sales tax reductions for that. I think everybody who goes to a grocery store is going to notice. If you buy Advil or Tylenol or cough syrup, if you buy shampoo or conditioner or skin lotion, if you buy diapers, baby diapers or adult diapers, all of those things are going to be without sales tax now. So pretty much everything that you'd go into a grocery store and buy would no longer be subject to sales tax. As I said before, we also are repealing the sales tax on services that we did last year. So as a result of that, about $1.2 billion of tax reductions per year that are paid by a broad swath of people in the state. And again, 20,000 people who would be paying the increase in taxes because of the increase over $1 million. I guess the other point that I want to make along what Justice Talmadge said is it's shorthand to call this a millionaire's tax, but this isn't about people who have $1 million. We're talking about people whose income in a given year is over $1 million. And then the tax is only on the portion of the income that is over $1 million in a single year. So this is a pretty rarefied group, less than 0.5% of people who live in our state.
You listen to the voice of Senator Jamie Pedersen here on the Gee and Ursula Show. Senator, I'm just going to tell you just the most simple way as possible. I like what you're selling. I don't like how you guys are selling it. If you go back to the August 2025 email, and in it, you wrote, I would like to force the Washington Supreme Court to reconsider its case law that considers income to be a property. Help me understand that whole thing in the email.
We can't do the millionaire's tax. This tax cannot stand if the Supreme Court upholds its 1933 decision. The 1933 decision from the state Supreme Court called Culliton, it was a 5-4 decision 93 years ago, it is the primary obstacle to having a fairer tax system where wealthy people would pay more.
Right.
So we must dismantle that. We must get the Supreme Court to change or to indicate that it doesn't agree with what their long dead predecessors did in 1933 if we want to have this kind of a change in the tax system.
Glad you brought that up. So let's just say the Supreme Court does rule that way and overturns this. what is the legal protection then that would stop the legislature from being like, hey, everybody making over 200,000, everybody making over 100,000? Like right now, this is the biggest problem in the state is most people. And when I say most, now it's even more now, especially after last week's article came out. More people don't trust the fact that it would be limited just to millionaires. And even myself, who, again, I agree with this tax. Even myself, I still don't really trust that would stop on the people making 100,000 or 200,000. How can that? Where's the legal protection there, sir?
So first of all, what the trust that we're trying to build to begin with is by reducing other taxes, by using the proceeds or part of the proceeds from the millionaires tax to reduce taxes that are paid by the other 8 million people who live in the state. So we're trying to develop that sense of trust that what we're really about is not just grabbing more money for more taxes, but actually changing the direction of our tax system to make it fairer. I would say the primary protection that you've got, that it's not going to extend down to people making $100,000, is Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution. That's the power of initiative, right? This, we know that even the millionaires tax is going to be tested at the ballot box by an initiative that opposes it. And people in the state are going to get a chance to vote on whether they want to do this tax or not. If they choose to do it, then, we'll have a chance to implement that. It'll go to the Supreme Court. They'll decide whether it's constitutional. Any change in the future by the legislature is also going to be subject to initiative. I think it is wildly unpopular to tax people who are making $100,000 to tax their income. So I don't believe the legislature would even try that.
Senator, our text line is blowing up right now. People, and again, these are people, whether they're R, whether they're D, these are people who just do not believe that they would be protected and that this is only directed to millionaires. This tax wouldn't take effect until 2029, but it does include an emergency clause which blocks a public referendum. And as you know, in Washington, voters have rejected income taxes multiple times. There's also nothing written into the legislation that would prevent you from lowering the threshold. If this is such a narrowly targeted tax, why not let voters weigh in on it?
Voters are going to weigh in on this. The proper way for them to weigh in on it is through an initiative process to repeal it. The state constitution, again, Article 1, Section 2, or Article 2, Section 1, says that tax measures are not subject to referendum. Measures that are for the support of state government and its existing institutions, which this tax is designed to do, are not subject to referendum, period. We said that, and we just said that explicitly in the bill, but that is the law, and the Supreme Court's going to be asked to, this month, I think, actually later this week, weigh in on that question. Okay. So, but that does not block a public vote. The public will get to vote on this when there's an initiative to try to repeal it.
At the public hearing before you voted on this, more than 60,000 people signed in opposition. That was the largest response in state history. How do you respond to critics who say, y'all just didn't listen?
I have no question that there are tens or even hundreds of thousands of people who were well organized and who don't like this idea. There are also millions of people who I trust like this idea a lot. And ultimately, we're going to find out at the ballot box when there's an initiative to repeal it, whether people want to try this experiment by having a tax on millionaires that will help lower taxes for the other 8 million people.
Senator, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it was the AG's office that advised your team to leave out an emergency clause. Is that correct?
I don't remember that piece of the advice. I had a lot of interactions with the Attorney General's office
Sure.
and the Solicitor General in particular
about
structure of the bill. And we talked with a lot of other stakeholders as well.
But that very deal right there, that would have given voters the right to challenge this law through a referendum.
I disagree about that.
Okay.
I just told you I believe that Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution does not allow tax measures to be subject to referendum. Whether we put that in the bill or not, that is the constitutional provision.
Senator, this is my last thing. Can you agree and or understand why over the last week there's a lot of people, I'm people by the way, that are now kind of skeptical of everything going on centered around the millionaires tax?
I think, honestly, that is just a matter of not having full information about what is going on. I don't think that there's anything.
You're saying I don't have. So the reason why I'm skeptical, is because the reason why is because I don't have the full information, and that's what you would say to constituents that are skeptical lately.
I mean, I think it depends on the source of the skepticism, right? But I don't believe that there's anything.
Senator, we just have to say the thing that we hear over and over again is, this is against the Constitution. Voters have voted against it repeatedly, and you are looking for any and every way that you can to force it, to make this with the hope that the state Supreme Court is going to rule in favor of giving this opening for a state income tax. I mean, this is what we're hearing over and over again.
Okay, but look, I do not believe it is contrary to the Constitution. I believe it is completely consistent with the Constitution as it's written. I think that the 1933 Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, made a mistake. I am asking for the Supreme Court in 2026, 93 years later, to take a second look at that. And we know that the Supreme Court all the time, both our Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court, changes its mind periodically and has a new understanding. That's all that's going on. I just think they were wrong 93 years ago.
Senator, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you very much.